You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio here on iTunes and CFRE. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And for another episode this week, I am joined by two very esteemed guests. I'll start with the person on my left. She is the exhibition and events coordinator for Visual Arts Mississauga. She's also a good friend from way back, and I'm very excited to chat with her about art and innovation. It's my homie, Eldiana Begovic. Yes, I said it right.
What's up? Yes, you did. You did good.
Amazing, amazing. I remember, because I think when I first interviewed on Rogers, I butchered it.
You may have, but
I probably said Begovic.
Yeah, you would have been on like a long list of people who did that. So.
Really? Eh?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about like shortening your last name?
No. Actually, I was like, can I just go by Eldiana? Like Cher.
Well, why don't you? I don't. You're like the only Eldiana that I know.
Exactly.
I don't think there's any other Eldianas.
That's it. Now everybody knows it's just Eldiana.
Yeah, I think after this recording, someone's going to register Eldiana as like a brand name.
Better not.
And that's it. Your chance is done.
It's mine.
And then sitting on your right is an entrepreneurial spirit, somebody who runs their own creative agency called Now Creative Group. And he's also helping out with the city of Brampton. He is another good friend, star of the Daniel Show. with T by Daniel Lewis. I got to give a huge shout out to my buddy Daniel Francavilla. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me, man.
No problem. I'm super pumped to be here in this bright lime green room.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we honestly do this to wake people up,
all right,
to get them ready to theorize.
Yeah, between the lime green and my matcha Chaitime, I'm good to go.
We got to get Chaitime to be a sponsor of my podcast eventually.
Oh yeah.
If you get them to be a sponsor, please loop me into that.
You'll be here every day. It's funny that you're like the fourth person to bring Chaitime into the studio during a recording. So hey, Chaitime, if you're listening. Hook a brother up. You're getting some free promo on the air. But I'm very excited to talk to the both of you. Like I mentioned, what I'm very excited about is the fact that I got representation from the arts world as well as the entrepreneurial innovation world. And some of the topics that we are going to theorize definitely fit between both of those disciplines. And one thing I kind of want to start off with is the state of innovation in Canada. So actually, I stumbled upon a very interesting article in the Financial Post last week where it was an interview with Navdeep Bains, who is the innovation lead for obviously our country. And it was pretty much putting in question how innovative Canada actually is and whether we are doing the right things to compete on a global level. And the one thing I'll say about this Financial Post piece is it did a very fair job at really challenging Navdeep Bains to really think about how far we've come from an innovation, science, economic development standpoint since I would say the last election when the Liberals were voted in. But actually, the name of the guy that wrote the article is James McLeod, and I thought he did a very good job in the video form of this article and really posing a lot of thought-provoking questions to Minister Bains. But I wanted to pick both of your brains on this because it's one thing that I think about quite regularly when I meet with entrepreneurs, when I meet with artists, when I meet with people that work for municipalities or provinces, or even for the actual country itself. Is Canada in a good position to compete at a national level, and are we focusing on the right things? And you know what, Daniel, let's begin with you because of your experience in the entrepreneurial space. Do you feel like Canada is as innovative as we think it is?
I definitely think that Canada as a country has a ton of work to do when it comes to the type of industries that we have, right? The type of industries that we're pushing and promoting. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think it's totally fine to take industries that we're huge in, like agriculture, and innovate within those industries, right?
Totally.
It doesn't mean that innovation just means building apps or something, right? Or the trendy startups that we see. Mm-hmm. I'm obviously a huge fan of those startups. I'm in the startup space all the time. But I think from a government level, it's not really about forcing people to be innovative in the way that they believe is innovative, or the types of industries that they think would work. So it was really interesting to watch this video, and the host there was actually challenging the minister a bit, pushing him a little bit, to talk about what does this mean, right? What is this innovation? Is this the kind of innovation that our country needs? So I definitely found it interesting. I do definitely believe that we need government support, of course. If as a country we want to move forward, you can't just kind of leave it up to the citizens who are busy trying to, pay their rent, pay their taxes, right? You got to kind of give them some leeway and some opportunity to innovate.
Yeah.
So I think creating space for innovation, opening up opportunities for collaboration, that type of thing, paired with funding and education is definitely the way to go.
Interesting. Eldiana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think ultimately, when we look at people who created amazing things in the last 50 years, they always talk about getting started in their garages. And I mean, why can't we one-up that? Why can't we start creating spaces?
Yeah.
We constantly get into circles. They're talking about infrastructure. They're talking about, artists need spaces. Tech people need spaces.
Yeah.
These third spaces that aren't their apartments and aren't work,
Yeah. And actually, one of the things I'll jump in there is I know that, even 5 years ago, co-working spaces weren't even really a thing, especially in the Peel region out here in Brampton, Mississauga. So to see that the government, not just the government, but, nonprofit organizations are funding these types of things, right? There's foundations, there's private investors getting into these things. Mississauga now has a handful of co-working spaces, and the city of Brampton is opening up their own as a city as well.
Yeah, the city's actually funding, which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So, the city in partnership with Ryerson, so you can really tell Ryerson runs 10 different they have the DMZ, Digital Media Zone, it used to be called. Yeah. I believe that's what it stood for, yes. They rebranded as just DMZ now. Yeah. They have 10 different versions of those zones, and they even have one in Mumbai and a couple of other places. So they're really pushing that innovation forward by creating these physical spaces and environments. And I think, obviously entrepreneurship is on the rise. But innovative entrepreneurship isn't just someone, sitting at home doing the same job they would have done at their desk at work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And this conversation with Nav Nanwa in the Financial Post comes off the heels of what they're calling a report card that's being released by the Liberal government around Canada's innovation. It's called Building a Nation of Innovators. And, it touches on a lot of interesting things. And the one thing I do want to bring up that both of you mentioned is, the fact that we are seeing an influx of co-working spaces here, across Mississauga and Brampton. For someone on the outside looking in, if I'm not someone who has an app idea, but a more, I would say, for lack of a better term, conventional business idea, are co-working spaces inviting to me? Because some may feel if I go to an incubator, I have to have an app idea because that's what's coming out of a lot of incubators, versus someone who may have a clothing line idea and that really wants to come out with cashmere sweaters that are environmentally friendly, if that even exists. But that's something that I would love to pose out there. Are people feeling almost intimidated that they want to go to a co-working space, that they almost have to be on the brink of technology versus actually having a conventional business idea? I mean,
I think the language needs to sort of be practiced a little bit more. It's kind of interesting. I recently sat in a bunch of community circles for the City of Mississauga's new project called Reimagining the Mall. And they're talking about taking over strip malls in the city and sort of revitalizing them into spaces. And it's funny how even just generationally, you have younger people talking about the third space, co-working spaces, and how other
which
people...
used to be the mall, right?
Right, yeah, which used to be the mall. And for older people... is still the mall. So they're a little confused as to why they can't do that outside of a food court anymore. And they don't know what that... They're like, what is this third space you were all talking about?
Some of the Bramley City Center food court.
Yeah, no, it's... honestly, Mississauga, it's a staple, right? And so I think it's about getting that language out there. People need to know what co-working spaces are. Yeah. So that, if you feel like you stumbled across one, you're not walking in feeling intimidated by it.
Totally.
I think, I know they have one here in Mississauga, Erin Mills Town Center, and it's being used for all kinds of things. They're having events there, and I think even yoga classes. And it's about creating a sense of community.
It's like multifunctional.
Yeah,
right?
everyone can buy into that.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start, rephrasing and using the language around that in a more positive way versus maybe just a little, not too focused. I think when we start talking about startups and businesses, we don't embrace what that really looks like. Yeah, people are intimidated. They're like, well, I didn't go to business school.
Yeah, just to touch on that, like, I think it's interesting that Staples now is making their stores
Studio
into like co-working spaces. Yeah, Staples Studio, which is, I only ever went to Staples for school supplies. So now the fact that it's becoming a co-working space.
But how smart is that? Because, how many, we're not really buying school supplies like we used to.
And people are going to probably buy stuff while they're there.
Yeah.
Right?
They reinvented their entire... I went to the location at University. It's like I think there was one in Montreal, and then this was like the pilot here. Man, it's... You want to be there, right?
Yeah.
They built in a whole cafe in there.
Yeah.
They have services. They have workshops. Like, speaking of T.Y. Daniel earlier,
he spoke there.
He even went and spoke there this week. My team went and got some social media footage and stuff.
Man. Nice.
So, like, it's like bringing that community, like you said. Where can people gather, right? Where do people want to gather?
Yeah.
And when you're outside of the school ecosystem, you don't really have that place. So, but speaking of it happening through schools, I think most of the major colleges and universities here in southwestern Ontario all have their own incubator. And that's it's been growing over the past few years. But Sheridan Edge, which is one of their accelerator incubator co-working spaces, however you'd like to phrase it, they actually just received from Nav Bains. He came and did an announcement yesterday, I think it was the day before, but $1.5 million investing into Edge. And it's great to see that the federal government is recognizing an incubator within Sheridan, within Mississauga, really showing that these are the places that will produce those exciting results.
Well, especially, now we're recording this podcast live from the University of Toronto, Mississauga. I'm about five years removed from school, 5 or 6, I would say. I graduated my MBA in 2014. And even when I come back to campus, it's almost like that switch in my head turns on to like a learning mode where I almost feel like because I'm around students, I get a little inspired that maybe, hey, maybe I should kind of stick around and do some work here and see where my mind takes me. Actually, I did a podcast a few weeks ago with a buddy of mine, Harmon Greywall, that started Labby in Brampton. And before we were recording, he was talking about how he thinks that these were the first innovation, spaces that existed for people, but they just were never noticed. People just assumed school was school and you went here and got your degree and that was it. But, for him going to University of Western, that's where he really got his, entrepreneurial passion and being able to empower himself. And it kind of leads me down another question is, do you feel like, as university institutions, they, you mentioned, a lot of them are having co-working spaces. Do you feel as if they're now encouraging more and more students to go down the entrepreneurial route? And maybe Eldiana, we'll start with you because I think that's something I'd love to pick your brain on from an art standpoint.
I definitely think so. I think automatically when kids go to art school, the question from the very get-go is, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
And I think that's an entrepreneurial thought process.
It is.
So when I hear artists and they talk about not being business savvy, I say that's incredibly impossible because at every turn they're using a business mindset. All the time, and artists are sort of, and since the beginning of time, really been on the precipice of innovation. They're always thinking about the next thing, and I think it goes hand in hand when you have business people. So from the get-go, as soon as they're leaving, and I think what we now need to do is realize that people who are coming from different practices, business people, science, STEM, like we need those people to turn around and look at creatives and talk about collaboration. I mean, some of the most powerful places on the planet are embracing and have always embraced that sense of collaboration between those industries. And I think it needs to happen here because we're so close. There's not too many of us. We're a country of a small population. We don't have too many big cities. We're coming across the same people over and over again. The fact that collaboration and that pollination of ideas isn't happening as often as it should be is kind of crazy.
I feel like that's one of the reasons now you're seeing in post-secondary institutions, a lot of faculties coming together around programs and actual degrees. I know in McMaster now, I'm still one of the profs there is still one of my close mentors. He was telling me about a new program that they launched, which intersected arts and business. They were only accepting a few people, but a lot of it was driven around, design thinking and being able to tap into your creativity and the way that you think about business solutions. But also a lot of the work that was being administered was very much self-directed, and it was put forward for the student to take ownership over their own learning, which I thought was pretty intriguing. I was like, wow, you're actually encouraging people to steer their own path within their actual degree versus sticking to a normal curriculum. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say, on the note of the programs, I know in Waterloo there's a GBDA. I always get the acronym wrong, but I know they teach everything from video to strategy to business, right? So that's huge because, like, as you mentioned, when you're in the institution or the protected world of being in school, that's when you can explore, right? That's when you can really push the boundaries and see, take your passion or your talent in the visual arts and see how you can use that in another realm, right? So you don't tend to do that once you've been placed into a job with a job description that tells you exactly where to stay within. So I think having that stuff in the post-secondary level is great, but also, some of the things that I want to address, talking about the state of innovation in Canada, based on that video, where does it actually start, right? Where does that innovation start? If you're going to teach people who have already graduated with a certain degree, with a certain mindset and a certain career trajectory, a very small percentage of those people will really be able to innovate and think outside the box, right? Outside the lines of the boundaries of what they've been taught, right? And it doesn't mean they're not amazing at what they do, but it's within that box. So I think the solution for Canada is if we can take, whatever funding is available for innovation that the minister was speaking about, and start at the elementary school level and the high school level, and just getting these kids to to think in an innovative way. I think that's where it really starts.
Yeah, it's fascinating that Baines talks about the fact that more and more kids are learning how to code. But to play devil's advocate, the one thing I do want to preface that the actual writer brought up during his interview was around the most recent news about GM pulling out of Oshawa, and you have these, for the most part, older Gen Xers, baby boomers that maybe were working at GM for 20, 30 years that are now going to be out of jobs. How hard of a transition they're going to face in this new workplace, especially if they are capable of working still. And he was pushing back on the minister about the notion that these laid off workers aren't going to be coding overnight. They're not going to be ones to really pick up skills that are more tech savvy because of just what they've learned throughout their entire lives. What would you say would be an effective way to take care of this portion of the workforce that probably is still capable of working, but for the most part may not know how to go about getting the right training to adapt their skills?
I think automatically, and this is a responsibility, like a better civic planning goal, right? Yeah. You need to create spaces for people to be able to even find the resources for the next thing. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about things that are popping up all the time beyond, co-working spaces. We're talking about like tool libraries, and people who come from trades or, people who've been working in factories their whole lives have a sort of skill set that maybe millennials might not have because we've been sort of born right onto the computer almost, right? Like,
and like encouraged to go down one path, which is the path of academia.
Exactly. We're really good with books and student debt. But I mean, they have a certain skill set that I know people are constantly looking for. Yeah. When you're thinking about why people need to get into tool libraries, like how many of us really own power tools in our spaces? And these are people who have that kind of knowledge, who are able to talk to somebody who has an idea and let them know if it's unrealistic or not. Yeah. And, they may not be able to use their hands anymore because we don't have another factory for them to go into. Yeah. But they do definitely have stuff right up in their brains, and they need to be able to share that information with people. So they need those spaces to be able to come across collaboration. You know what I mean? They need to talk to other people who are thinking about designing the next tech piece, or I don't know, the next car.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah, looking at taking their knowledge of the industry and reinventing that and applying it to the people who are trying to sometimes they are trying to reinvent the wheel, but with the advice and the expertise of some of these people from the industry who have been there for decades, they can really transfer that knowledge, right? And I think there's a lot of different types of careers in general, not just people that are of a certain age. But in general, like so many jobs every year are being replaced by computers, by automation, by AI, by machinery, right? So, there are these new information industry jobs that are available, and whether that be again that peer-to-peer mentorship, whether it be advising, content, sales, there's things like sales, like that's an industry that. I mean, that's a function that every single business and industry needs, whether you're in the nonprofit sector or, the oil and gas industry, whatever it is. So, retooling those skill sets and actually helping them to thrive in those environments, I think is something that we can do. And you're right. It is amazing that we're going to teach all these kids to code. It does open up your mind to the possibilities. I definitely love that. But we can't forget about the people who have been here, already working for decades.
So just to close this topic off, the fact that we are in an election year, what would you say is the one thing you hope for the next 4 years to see out of Canada's innovation economy? And Eldiana, will begin with you.
I think definitely the approach academically. We need to get into schools. We need to start encouraging kids to talk about what's realistic. What does the future of our country look like, and how can they contribute? And that really, they have to change that. That's in the curriculum. That's in a societal structure. That's in an everyday conversation way. So as long as they're actively doing that, they're building the foundation, right? And again, like the spaces for people to be able to do that, I think is important, and making it an everyday thing, whether it be, bringing spaces back into libraries and making that a thing for kids. I think the government needs to really reinvigorate the education system.
Excellent. Daniel?
Yeah, I definitely would build on that. But with the education system, obviously starting younger, like we talked about, opening up the idea to entrepreneurship and encouraging that as a career path. I honestly don't even remember when the first time it came up in any curriculum, in any textbook, anywhere, about the idea of an entrepreneur. Right?
I actually took an entrepreneurship class during my MBA as well. I think in my undergrad.
MBA.
Yeah, but you had to pay for that.
What about high school?
I know high school there was nothing. It's funny because I went to Turner Fenton and Brampton, and there was a pretty extensive business curriculum, but I don't recall there being a thorough entrepreneurship class.
There's business, and I've interviewed like countless high school students that want internships, and even post secondary that are in quote unquote business programs. And they don't understand how the business runs. They don't understand the idea of entrepreneurship. No. And, it's actually really shocking to me sometimes because I'm able to put them in the situation of being right in that, not only are you hustling alongside our business, our team, but we work with dozens of entrepreneurs and activists and stuff at a time that you can then be exposed to. But a lot of them still have that, that closed mind or that structure they've been given. So for sure, the education, the curriculum, looking at it a little bit earlier on, physical spaces, as we talked about. And the reason for that is that also allows for things that you don't have access to at home, like an entire recording studio like this. Let's say that just now I'm starting to get interested in this world of podcasting and content creation, but at no point in my high school career did I take music. I'm not even familiar with how to use this equipment now, right? And so to expose students to that a little bit younger, just give them the possibility that is a thing, right? And I think that'll really help change the mindset, change the thinking, and set us on the right path.
Awesome. All right, moving on to our next topic, just a simple question to both of you. Have you guys been to Ontario Place, Eldiana?
Yes, I have.
And what was your favorite part of Ontario Place?
While it was still Ontario Place?
Yeah.
The IMAX Theater.
Yeah. I feel like it's everyone's favorite. Daniel, what about you?
I honestly don't even remember when I was there last.
You and everybody else.
Yeah, it's that blurred of a memory. I just remember it being on the waterfront, and me driving down the Gardner, passing by is my memory.
Well, speaking of Ontario Place, it was announced this week that Cirque du Soleil, Quebec's own, is coming to Ontario Place this fall with about 80 to 90 shows, which was announced by Premier Doug Ford and the provincial government. This is interesting because a couple weeks ago there was some interesting chatter around Ontario Place and its future, whether or not, the Ford government would consider maybe selling the space or even, dismantling it and allowing it to be commercial or, potentially revitalizing it. And it's been closed. It's been closed since 2012 when Dalton McGuinty and the Liberals were in power. And there's always it's a space that's always been there. I think when people think about Ontario Place, they probably think about their childhood. I remember for me, Ontario Place was always a big part of my CNE visits because of the fact that CNE was located on one side of Exhibition Place, and you just cross the bridge to go to Ontario Place. That's the only time I'd ever go check out the actual space itself. But it's interesting that we're starting to see some thoughts taking place as to how this space can be best utilized, and Cirque du Soleil seems to be a foray into maybe testing this area out as an entertainment complex per se. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the actual space itself. I remember when Amazon was being pitched to come to Ontario, somebody actually put out a suggestion on Twitter that maybe we should give Amazon Ontario Place completely and allow them to create this massive tech campus. Obviously, that didn't happen. And we're also seeing some great activity with the Cinesphere. They are playing movies, which I think is pretty cool. I haven't gone to one yet, but they're playing movies that are pretty much all high action that will allow the actual experience of watching it in a IMAX theater become worthwhile. But yeah, let's get some thoughts around the table on your theory on Ontario Place and whether we should care and whether something should happen to it. And Eldiana, we'll begin with you.
So I'd like to say that I don't think the Cirque du Soleil project is really the beginnings of this. In 2016, there was a very successful, in my memory, arts and music festival called In Future.
Oh, okay.
And so it was, I believe, multi-funded by lots of different arts councils. So they got all kinds of grant money and sponsorship to basically start this festival, which is expensive when you think about the risk factors to hold something in like an abandoned amusement park.
Well, there's also a lot of music festivals nowadays are super risky from an investment standpoint. Yeah. A lot of them are not even coming back after being in business for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and I think more so it was sort of a pilot on like how can we take this space and revitalize it into something interesting where people are going to want to see it again. Who has the money? The young professionals in Toronto. What will make them want to take an Uber to go see this place? And I think it was interesting because it was Instagrammable for sure, but it really is about re-seeing the space on a regular level. I don't know if they can keep doing stuff like an arts and music festival, but I do think it's interesting that should be a component. That's definitely a drive because it is supposed to be an entertaining space. It always was, and a waterfront is hard to make much more than entertainment, but I'm excited for them to keep using the space for more entertaining ventures. I don't know what else they can do with it.
Yeah, it definitely is the most underutilized space, I would say, within the city. I will also say that, to your point, it's kind of sad when you drive by and nothing's happening. And considering the premium location and considering it is close to the water and considering a lot of the activities that take place, with the exhibition place, with BMO Field, with music happening at Budweiser Stage, like there's all this action around it, but this one area just stays abandoned because no one knows what to do with it. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like incredibly valuable real estate, as you mentioned. It is surprising that it's taking that long to, even whether or not it's a government or a private sector solution, it is surprising how long it's taken. One thing on the Cirque du Soleil note, though, I think they said they'd be doing 80 or 90 shows, which is a huge commitment.
That's huge, yeah.
Not knowing even how any of them are going to go, what the sales are going to be like. But I thought it was interesting because that Cirque du Soleil, although it's a Canadian company, it's a private business.
It is,
right?
It is.
And to have that as the attraction, not one of many, but the attraction that the government's promoting and pushing, is super confusing. A, and then B, what is the price point? Cirque du Soleil shows are never cheap, right?
That's
so
true.
Is it something that is exclusive where only certain people can actually access these shows?
I've actually never been. Have any of you ever been?
No, I haven't, probably because I've checked the ticket prices.
Yeah, I thought about it for a date night a couple times, and the ticket prices were a huge turnoff. I heard they're amazing.
I think I've seen like a couple of versions, because obviously they have many sub brands and stuff like that I've seen, at least one in Vegas. And again, of course, premium price point being in Vegas, but still, as a franchise, they are premium shows.
Yeah.
So to see that being pushed, I was a little bit, confused about. Nevertheless, it's great to support, Canadian talent and the arts. The other thing I thought was interesting, looking at the comments on these articles about the Ontario Place announcement, the vast majority of people saying that they want to keep the structures, right? Yeah. Keep the Cinesphere, keep the bridge, keep whatever was there.
Yeah.
And definitely repurpose that, make it public park, that type of stuff. So people aren't looking for something crazy innovative here. They really just want that area preserved and, the ability to use it, right? Talking about it being a family-friendly space, so not taking away a family-friendly space by turning it into something that's not, right, welcoming for families. So I think those are some of the comments I was looking at online, and I'm definitely open to see what solutions they come up with.
It's definitely millennials and everyone before us that have this affinity for that space, mainly because we've probably all gone there as a kid, and there was this miniature water park that was there, and again, it was attached to the CNE for a number of years, and again, I still remember the fact that I actually live quite close to it, and I drive by it on Lakeshore, and it's something that again has been a huge part of Toronto, that for it to be dismantled or to completely disappear, I think would be pretty unfortunate. It'd probably give you the same feeling that Honest Ed's probably gave a lot of people when that was dismantled to open up condos.
Except this is the actual waterfront.
Yeah, this is on the waterfront, which we all know is definitely premium real estate. There was some wacky ideas out there of maybe putting a casino there.
Yeah.
I don't know how we feel about that.
Was that still back when Doug Ford and Rob Ford were talking about it? Or was that just a Doug Ford?
It sounds like a Ford idea.
I think it was. I think Doug Ford had mentioned it. I remember the old casino talk in Toronto. I believe was supposed to be in and around Blue Jays Way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember, it came up like from a city level a while back.
They wanted like a downtown Toronto casino.
Which doesn't make sense. I mean, like when you're thinking about big cities, like you look at Chicago and their waterfront, they have water and they're
beautiful
using
Ferris
it.
wheel.
They're using it. You know what I mean?
The pier's amazing.
So, I mean, I don't know how many of us are going to swim in Lake Ontario, but that's prime space to keep your citizens very happy by giving them a space of entertainment and leisure. And if they put up a condo or a casino, I'm going to be very angry.
So in a perfect world, if let's say the city planners of Toronto were to come up to you and be like, hey, Eldiana, we're going to give you Ontario Place. You figure out what you want to do with it. What would you honestly put there and why? I
do think the idea of some sort of creative campus. I know Mississauga sort of approaching... there's condos with their waterfront that's coming up down the pipeline, but like a space for, I'm going to throw the word community. It's really, it's about creating community centers, educational spaces, a combination of everything where people can walk out of their homes and feel like they have everything at the edge of their fingertips. You know what I mean? And there's not enough spaces like that here in the GTA. Which makes Toronto, the number one place that young people want to move to. But it's so easy. It's like a blank canvas. It's so easy to just think of this. The buildings that are already there are amazing. And there's a sense of nostalgia that I think that they don't really need to rip anything away. They just need to sort of revitalize and make sure some of those spaces are safer. They're a little scary looking right now. But I mean, I'm pretty sure proms are still renting out.
Well, Atlantis?
Yeah.
The venue?
And so it's these, I think, But
the only thing I remember about Atlantis is when Vince Carter was a Toronto Raptor, he'd always hold his birthday there.
because it's that cool.
Yeah.
It's like Raptors cool. So, I mean, it's prime, but I don't want it to be going to waste to, you know, a niche group of people. Like a casino doesn't sound like it's really enterprising.
Yeah.
You know?
Daniel, what about you? If they gave you the ability to replan the Ontario Place space, what would you do?
I mean, I have no idea specifically what I would do with it. I think there's a lot of the property that I have no idea what's even included within Ontario Place. I know it's
definitely the Cinesphere.
Yes, definitely the Cinesphere.
And then that weird, not really weird, but
bridge.
Bridge. And then there's this
like
glass
silos and abandoned logs.
I remember as a kid going inside this little glass structure, and there was always like a Lego museum that was there. That was pretty cool.
I do remember that.
And then there's like boats, like you could get paddle boats around.
Yes. They still have the log water ride.
Oh yeah,
it's very creepy.
It's
but
there now?
Yeah, like you can't go on it, but it's like the remnants are there. It's they should do like a horror movie.
It's super weird for sure. I mean, I definitely
Halloween haunt.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it needs to be a space that's accessible, right? I don't like the idea of saying, all right, it's been off the market for this long, and now we're just going to open up to this private business, and they're going to run their thing, and they're going to set the prices and stuff like that, right? I think because the waterfront is so limited, other cities around the world have done amazing things with their waterfronts. So it's an opportunity for Toronto to do something like that and make the waterfront, again, more physically accessible, allow people to easily get there, commuting, jumping off the streetcar, going up there, up Lakeshore and stuff like that. So I think I'd just like to see some type of, as you mentioned, some leisurely environment that people can easily get to that doesn't cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with the both of you. I'd love to see it not becoming a privately owned space, but being a space for community. Just having it as another event space or multifunctional space that people could utilize to do pop-up events, or like I know Aurora did the Winter Festival there, which I thought was pretty cool, but then that's another example of some private sort of coming in and taking ownership over it. But to your point around some of the developments that are taking place with the Mississauga waterfront, and even the things that we've seen that take place at Yonge and Dundas Square, considering how busy that space is, why not move some of those events to Ontario Place and create a different mystique around the city and showcase that side of the city? Because I feel a lot of that, if you want that experience of being close to the water, you're either going to the harborfront or you're going over to Toronto Island, and no one's really thinking about what's accessible to them from an Ontario Place standpoint. So I'd love to see that. They're pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to our final topic, and I thought this would be a great little intersection when it comes to art and technology and innovation. And I stumbled upon a very interesting article that I felt was quite timely when I think about people within my network and me myself being someone that loves going to art galleries. It was an article that I found on a website called Artsy, and it was an editorial about how somebody was quitting Instagram because it made them appreciate art more. And to provide more context, this person just seemed very disgruntled at the fact that people are now using Instagram and art galleries as a way to take really nice photos of themselves versus actually appreciating the art that's in front of them. And one prime example, and I don't know if any of you attended this exhibit, but the Yayoi Kusama's Infinity Mirrors exhibit at the AGO, I felt was the most Instagrammed exhibit of all time. I feel like everybody on my timeline was taking photos in front of these polka dots to the point where I felt like I didn't have to pay for a ticket to this exhibit because I had seen everything on Instagram. And I get it was quite the amazing exhibition that was taking place, but I personally felt Instagram sort of ruined the intrigue around what was actually taking place, and would love to get your theory on this. Is it a problem, or is it actually a great marketing tool? Are we actually getting people that would never visit art galleries actually in art galleries and appreciating the art to an extent? But using Instagram as a tool to show that appreciation. And Eldiana, because you are the exhibitions and events coordinator for VAM, let's get your thoughts on this to start things off.
So to start, I did go to the Kusama exhibit.
Okay.
I was going to go regardless of how many people were Instagramming it.
Show us your Instagram account right now. I'm sure there's a whole row of photos.
All of them. Actually, I didn't get a good one. So the interesting thing about that exhibition is when you went into each room, so this exhibition was sort of spread out, they gave you, I think, like a 30-second window that you could be in there because of this Instagram problem.
Oh, really?
And when you think about these spaces, to really enjoy them, you can't enjoy them in 30 seconds. So it really was just for the Instagrammers. So they ruined it for all of us.
Really, eh?
They did, yeah. But they really did. But I do think it's important that these opportunities to Instagram maintain themselves in art spaces. And I assure you, as much as they are a pain in terms of project management, because whoever had to think of that 30-second or 15-second time rule did it because that traffic was crazy.
Yeah.
It is a benefit. Like, you're thinking about all the people who are standing in line, who are seeing other exhibitions in the space, who are going to restaurants right afterwards, paying for city parking. Like,
so
it's a huge economic boom for tourism. And beyond that, the Instagram moment is like easy, cheap marketing. It is like the way everything goes. I mean, hashtag Kusama, and all of a sudden everyone you've ever come across was there. And I mean, now the AGO, I think, is they've locked down a permanent permanent piece, which is huge for the AGO. Like, culturally, for the AGO, for us here in Canada to have pieces like that in for our people to see regularly, that's massive. That puts us on the scale with, New York City and Los Angeles. And we want to be up there. And that's because it was successful. That's because people were Instagramming. So sometimes it's a little bit annoying to stand in line around these people with their cameras out. And these very beautiful Instagram people who are like, take a picture of me. But I think it's a means to an end. Like, it ends up serving us. It's the greater good. And I'm okay with it. The experience in art is the product.
Yeah.
So we got to be smart about it. And, it might be annoying and you might put your nose up in the air if you're an art snob. But it's important. It really does. It serves us and we need it. So Instagram away.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We are starting to see some of these interactive exhibits pop up, like Happy Place, and if you want to call that an art exhibit, let me know if I've offended you, Eldiana, because I know you're quite the purist. Or even, I think there was one about illusions that people were using as well. You're starting to see these more interactive art exhibits that are encouraging social media usage, because I think there is an element to that that really allows it to be special. But I think you bring up a fair point. For me, outside of if I never attended the AGO and if I wasn't on their mailing list and I didn't see any of this exhibit on my Instagram, I probably wouldn't have ever known about it. But the fact that, again, outside of being on the AGO's list and attending events like First Thursdays, the fact that a lot of people on my Instagram feed who I never knew were art aficionados and maybe aren't, maybe really just wanted that really good brand photo. Actually, for me to think about the fact that, okay, maybe they thought they'd get that really good Instagram photo, but they actually spent money to go support an artist, makes that a pretty reasonable trade-off in my eyes. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I think what's really crazy about this is, art is going viral because it's an experience, right? And also because the act of sharing is kind of built in. Like, they've created these exhibits and some of these pieces to be shared and experienced. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that you're timed when you're in there because of that.
Yeah.
But even looking at, you already brought it up, but looking at Happy Place, I was in New York in the fall, and I totally wanted to go to that. And of course, I see that it's like sold out. Huge waiting list, and then at one point it was just like, we don't even know when we're doing it again or when the next dates are. I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
and he had FOMO.
Yeah, I totally had FOMO. I'm like,
fear of missing out.
I'm like, I'm all the way here in New York, but it started in LA, right? They tested out there, brought it to New York, sold it out, cut it off, and then brought it to Toronto now. So when I saw the people posting it from it in Toronto, I was just kind of like, really, that's here now? No thanks, right? It was kind of like, it was like for me, it wasn't that the novelty wore off, but like I thought it was this really epic thing in New York, and they actually made it exclusive to the point where I even emailed them, and they got back to me being like, sorry, we don't actually have another date. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have another date?
Man.
It's like insane demand. Why wouldn't you extend it, right? But that's also cool. So I think the idea of that limited experience, that limited time limit, limited time limit, is something that millennials, at least, are not familiar with, right?
Yeah.
We're here. We're able to stream stuff anytime, anywhere, watch things as many times as we want to, download them, right? Like, we don't have that. We don't have the unique experiences that have to be done in that time, right? So I think there is a cool element to that. I think the idea of having kind of these rotating exhibits is cool because it not only gives people the chance to see it because of the hype, but they can also become interested in the arts, right? And appreciate different types of pieces that they would see on a regular basis. So I know a lot of art galleries are always looking to get members, right? That's a way to get members. And I think that it brings art to a whole new world. When I was in Paris as well in the fall, different trip, I was in these galleries where it's like dead silent, right? Yeah. And it's like you like wait for the person in front of you to finish reading the thing, and then you move over and you read it.
Gotta be considerate.
Yes, and like you try to take a picture, like we were talking about earlier before the podcast started. Like obviously a little bit different in the Vatican, right? But I mean, when you're in some of these museums, like you want to like. You're not familiar with how to enjoy this, right? Yeah. How to experience it. So seeing exhibits like Happy Place and this one here are definitely positive for sure.
It's great that you mentioned the exclusivity or the limited edition factor, because I know so many people when an exhibit or a big exhibit happens in New York, and similar to your example, you miss it, and then it comes to your local city, or it's within arm's reach. People just shrug it off. Like, I don't want to go.
True. That's such a Toronto thing.
It's such a Toronto thing where it's like, I totally remember. Like, I'll use a restaurant example, like Momofuku in downtown Toronto. Right. I know people that were like, I've been there in New York. I don't need to go to Toronto. It's not the real thing. You got to go to New York. So I think that's a mentality that I think really kind of really relies and really rests within us as millennials. Is we have that need to want to experience it before other people, and when it comes close to us and we're seeing a lot more of our people within our network taking in this experience, we no longer want it anymore.
It's kind of like Drake.
Yeah.
Oh, it's totally like Drake.
Once the world adopted Drake.
But the Drake factor is that when something huge happens, I went on vacation to Spain, and they're like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Toronto." They're like, "Drake?" I'm like, "Yeah." But it really is the factor of when it's the cool factor. It made us cool to have Kusama in Toronto.
Cool by association.
Right. And what that does is open avenues for other galleries or cultural spaces or music venues to be like, oh, there's something happening in Toronto. Right. And they too want to bring other things. Maybe for the first time, they're not sort of a rendition of something else. And all of a sudden, we start to perpetuate the culture. The culture starts to happen. It grows.
True. Same thing happens back to our very first topic with innovation and startups, right?
Yeah.
People want to be in those startup hubs where all the startups are and that environment, right? So same thing can happen with these attractions and art pieces, right?
Yeah, and one funny example I want to bring up when it comes to the Instagram generation that we live in, and the fact that people are obsessed with. Sorry, I was checking my phone. Sorry, train of thought. So Jay-Z and Beyonce took this epic photo when they released their song Ape Shit in front of the Mona Lisa.
Wicked.
And it's a dope photo. I'm a big Jay-Z fan. My wife's a big Beyonce fan, and we really appreciated it.
That's so cute.
And now I'm seeing people take similar photos in front of any painting. They probably don't know who the artist is, but they're doing it because Jay-Z and Beyonce did it.
No, I just rewatched that video, the Ape Shit video, because I think it's genius. First of all, it just shows you how powerful they are. Yay, Beyonce. But it really is, what does that do? I mean, they said something powerful with that video about diversity and sort of representation. But also, it's like now people are like, I want to go to see the Louvre, and they didn't want to before. They're like, oh, that's for like old ladies who go visit Paris, you know. And now it's something else. It's about revitalizing. We give people opportunities to do that for culture. All of a sudden, we see the growth, and we give creatives opportunities to keep doing what they need to do to make society interesting.
No, I bet.
You know?
I bet it was. Yeah, it was pretty iconic photo. I'm looking at it right now as we speak.
It's genius.
But so, I guess the one thing I do want to just, to close this topic off is to get a sense of, as an operator of an art gallery or someone in charge of exhibitions and events, are you somewhat, and being a purist when it comes to the art world, for as long as I've known you, ultimately, do you like this direction? Because at the end of the day, it means that more people are going to be visiting art galleries and taking it in. Or do you feel like, what's the way I'm trying to put it? Like, do you almost feel like you need to provide them an education when they come visit to really allow them to appreciate it versus just coming there because it's cool?
I think people are going to absorb didactics regardless. If you're waiting in the lines at Kusama, I remember I was with my friend, you're waiting those lines anyway, you were going to read what's on the wall. Yeah. So people are still absorbing that information in some way. But I think it is a balance, because we're talking about, when you go into the Louvre and it's quiet and it's got that like weird, you have to wait for the next person to leave before you get to the art piece. That sense of slowness, I think we're missing from society in general. We need to relax a little bit, and art spaces are kind of the space to do that. So I think it is a balance. We want to be able to create these blockbuster shows where people are like so excited to take an Instagram photo, but I think we also need to encourage art spaces and theater spaces and music spaces for people to go just to slow down. So I think it's definitely a balance, but I'm like, Instagram away, do your thing.
Yeah, it's a great marketing tool.
Yeah, no Instagram shame here, really.
Yeah. Dana, what are your closing thoughts on this?
Well, as someone who went to OCAD University.
Yes, you did. Sorry for totally missing that. You did go to OCAD.
You're not an artist.
Oh my God. Tell the listeners what you did at OCAD.
I went to OCAD for graphic design.
Yes.
So in OCAD, there was a very big division between the art students and the design students.
Really, eh? That's interesting.
Different building, different part of the building, stuff like that. Very different streams, very different styles. But I always learned a ton from my friends that were in the illustration side or the fine arts side, and just being able to see their shows and their portfolios and their process was always super inspiring. Yeah. So, I consider myself to be a creative. I'm definitely not a painter or visual artist. And I can't physically build stuff. Really got my worst marks in those form and structure courses that were a huge pain. But I have that appreciation for it, right? Yeah. And being able to, as a creative of any kind, whether you're a writer or you're in music or graphic design, being exposed to that is super helpful and amazing. So if we can make those experiences, again, more engaging, open them up to the masses, and get us going frequently, then I think it's a positive thing overall. Yeah,
just to close this out, I find it interesting, more specifically in the graphic design world, because it is more of a digital art form, that you are seeing a lot of graphic artists use Instagram for their portfolials.
Totally.
Totally. As a way to push the envelope. It's not to say that visual artists who use, paper and pen aren't doing the same thing. Like, there's actually Harbin Graywell, who I had on the show a couple weeks ago. He owes me for all these shout outs. He actually is a sketch artist, and he's starting to get back into it. And he created an Instagram.
Live sketch.
He did a live sketch of me, which was pretty cool. I'll have to show it to Eldiana after, get it displayed at BAM. But he actually created an Instagram account to showcase his sketches because he wanted to get himself out there. So in that means it makes sense. But no, I think it's a fair point. I think ultimately there is an appreciation, whether it's real or not, we don't know. But if it's almost as if when you're sampling new music for the first time, or when you're taking in a brand new show, or when you're eating new food, if the first couple bites are somewhat good and people around you are telling you, hey, this is good, more than likely you're going to give it a shot and try to grow an appreciation for it.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
And just to add, like I said, that's just for general viewers, right? General consumers of this work. But as fellow creators, I think it's always amazing to see that cross collaboration and to see what people are actually inspired by.
Yeah, totally.
And just, that inspiration is endless. You will constantly need different sources of that inspiration.
There's
100%.
a whole idea that like an artist or a painter, but I mean in creatives in general, you can't create alone. You can't you can't do it by yourself.
No, you can't.
So you need to see other material and you need to be around other people who are enjoying it. So wherever that happens, we just need to make sure it keeps going.
Totally. Well, I think that's a great note to conclude this week's episode. I really appreciate the time from both Eldiana and Daniel. And before we conclude, I want to give you guys an opportunity to promote whatever you want to promote, whether it be VAM related, Now related, City of Brampton related, whatever you want. The mic is yours to give a shout out or try to sell tickets to your next exhibit or to try to get a job. Whatever you want.
It's like Nav's looking at me.
And Eldiana, let's begin with you. Maybe let us know about Now streaming. I know it's currently taking place, but let us know what VAM's up to.
So it's our exhibition. It's our annual youth exhibition. So we have amazing creatives from all around the GTHA who are exhibiting their work at VAM until Sunday, February 17th, I believe. So Now streaming is really about talking about the evolution of art and artists who are using new media and traditional media and finding that happy medium and sort of like having their own voices about what's happening in society with those mediums. So check it out, Now streaming at Visual Arts Mississauga.
I love that name, Now streaming.
Yeah, that's so clever. I wish I thought of that.
Artists, man.
You better copyright that. I might steal that from you. Daniel, what do you got on the go, man? You're always working on a lot of stuff.
Yes, so a few really exciting things. Obviously, my agency, Now Creative Group. You can check us out on Instagram at Now Creates. We're just expanding the team, niching down into a lot more of the branding stuff, social media content, and producing some of our own content, such as podcasts and video series. My nonprofit, Access, which I've had founded in Brampton for the last, 13 years almost now. What we've been doing is these Bright Ideas pitch competitions. So any young people out there, especially youth or students that have ideas for, good community projects, social change projects, social enterprise, accessinnovation.ca is where you can apply for funding and support. And then, of course, I'm working with the city on a few projects, including the incubator that we talked about, downtown Brampton. So, again, stay tuned. Things are always changing with the way politics and council works and funding cycles, but it's very exciting stuff. So just Google, Brampton Incubator Project. I'm sure you'll find it at some point, and I'm happy to collaborate on those types of initiatives. So yeah, just feel free to find me there.
Amazing. And hopefully you two both collaborate.
I was going to say, this sounds so good.
I feel like there's a lot of intersection here, whether it be art exhibits happening at creative spaces or somehow maybe artists using future incubator spaces. I don't know. I feel like there's going to be some good synergy amongst Eldiana and Daniel. But thank you both for joining us here on this episode of New Theory Radio. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it's New Theory Radio on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's at New Theory Radio. So make sure you have the ad in front of that. As well, you can connect with me on Twitter. It's at Nanwa or on Instagram at Nav Nanwa. And again, we do the show weekly, released on Fridays on iTunes. And we'll be back again here next week with another episode. So thank you so much for tuning in, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.